It was the kind of cold that seeped straight into your bones, the kind of cold you couldn't shake no matter how many times you rubbed your hands together. On the cracked wooden bench at the edge of Jefferson Park, a young girl sat hunched forward, her arms wrapped tightly around a thin jacket that used to be someone else's. Her name was Lila, and at just 12 years old, she had already learned what it meant to survive without expecting much from the world. Beside her, her mother rocked slowly, her lips moving without sound, as if she were carrying on a conversation no one else could hear. Some days her mother would talk to invisible people, laugh at nothing, or cry into her hands. Other days, she would just stare into the distance, eyes glassy and far away. Lila never knew which version of her mother she'd get when the sun came up. All she knew was that she couldn't leave her alone. They'd been moving from place to place for as long as Lila could remember. Church basements, overfilled shelters, the back corner of the 24-hour laundromat when the night clerk looked the other way. If they were lucky, they'd get a cot at a warming centre. If they weren't, it was this bench or under the awning of the old post office with a blanket that smelled like mildew. School had been something Lila once tasted but never got to keep. She went for a few months when a volunteer from the shelter helped with fees and supplies, but that ended as quickly as it began. Since then, she'd learned from scraps, old library books she found in donation bins, worksheets kids left behind at the park, anything with letters and numbers she could copy. This morning, her stomach ached the way it did most days. She'd skipped breakfast so her mum could have the last granola bar. Hunger was familiar, but the feeling she hated most wasn't that empty pit. It was the way people looked at them. Some stared, some avoided eye contact altogether. Others whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Poor thing, crazy lady's kid, lost cause. Lila had stopped crying about it a long time ago. Crying didn't fill a stomach or get you inside a warm building. Instead, she sat quietly, watching the world pass by, tucking away small details the way other kids collected toys. The sound of sneakers on the sidewalk, the smell of fresh bagels drifting from the corner bakery, the way the school bus rattled to a stop down the block, letting out a stream of kids with backpacks and clean sneakers. And every time she saw them, a part of her ached, not just for the books or the lessons, but for the way they seemed to belong somewhere. That was the morning she saw her, a girl about her age, stepping off the bus in a neat plaid skirt, hugging a lunchbox close to her chest. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect braid, and she walked with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing there's someone waiting for you at home. Their eyes met for a brief second. The girl hesitated, then looked away, pretending to search for something in her bag. Lila lowered her gaze to her own hands, chapped from the wind, and wondered, just for a moment, what it would feel like to sit next to that girl in class, to swap notes, share snacks, and whisper about things that didn't involve survival. She didn't know it yet, but this tiny passing moment was the first thread of a story that would pull two very different worlds together. The next few days passed in the same rhythm Lila had come to expect, mornings spent keeping her mum calm, afternoons wandering near the park or the library. She'd learned to recognise which spots were safe and which corners to avoid. Still, every morning, that same school bus would stop down the block, and Lila would catch a glimpse of the girl in the plaid skirt. Sometimes the girl walked with friends, her laugh ringing out in short bursts. Other times she trailed behind, eyes fixed on the ground, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. Lila noticed these things, she always noticed. One Thursday the air was warmer than usual, a thin layer of spring sunlight cutting through the grey. Lila had convinced her mum to sit on the bench closest to the small public library, a place where the staff didn't mind if Lila slipped in quietly to read in the corner. Books were the only place she felt truly safe. That's where it happened. She was kneeling by the lowest shelf in the children's section, flipping through a battered math workbook she'd found in the discard bin, when a shadow fell across the page. Lila looked up, startled. The girl in the plaid skirt stood there, clutching a thick textbook to her chest. "Hey," the girl said softly, almost like she wasn't sure she should be speaking. Lila hesitated. "Hi." The girl glanced at the workbook. "You like math?" Lila shrugged. I like figuring things out. A small smile tugged at the corner of the girl's mouth. I'm terrible at it. Been stuck on fractions for weeks. She held up her textbook, the pages marked with sticky notes and pencil smudges. My tutor quit last month. Now I just guess. Lila shifted, unsure if this was a trap or some kind of test. Fractions aren't so bad once you know the trick, she said carefully. The girl tilted her head. You think you could, maybe, show me? Lila blinked. No one had ever asked her for help with schoolwork before. She nodded, slow but certain. Yeah, I could try. They sat down at a small round table in the corner, the kind meant for toddlers, their knees bumping against the undersized chairs. Lila took the pencil from the girl's hand and began drawing 2 uneven circles, shading half of one. See? This is 1/2, and if you cut it into 4 pieces, each piece is 1/4. You just have to make the bottom numbers match before you add or subtract. The girl leaned closer, studying the paper like it was a map to some place she'd been searching for. Oh, that makes sense. No one ever explained it like that. For the first time in a long while, Lila felt her chest swell with something that wasn't hunger or worry. It was pride, quiet, steady, and warm. When they finished, the girl closed her book and smiled. I'm Emily. Lila, she replied. Do you come here a lot? Emily asked. Lila glanced toward the front of the library, where her mother sat on the bench outside, humming to herself under the weak sun. Yeah, when I can. Emily hesitated, like she wanted to ask more but didn't know how. Maybe, if you're here tomorrow, we could go over the next chapter. Lila nodded, her fingers curling around the pencil she'd been using. Sure. It wasn't a promise carved in stone, just a simple agreement between 2 girls in the corner of a library. But for Lila, it felt like the start of something she didn't dare name yet. The next afternoon, Lila was there early, her fingers drumming against the edge of the library table. She'd found a spot near the back, away from the main aisle, so no one would question why a girl with no backpack and no new clothes was hanging around. Outside, she'd convinced her mum to sit under the same tree as yesterday, leaving her with a small cup of water and a promise to be right back. When Emily walked in, she looked different somehow. Lighter, like the weight on her shoulders had shifted, even if just a little. She carried 2 granola bars in her hand, setting one on the table before sliding into the chair beside Lila. For you, Emily said. I told my mum I wanted an extra snack. Lila hesitated, her first instinct to push it back. I'm okay. Emily raised an eyebrow. You helped me yesterday, let me help you today. The wrapper crinkled in Lila's hand as she gave in. She tried not to eat too fast, but her empty stomach betrayed her. Emily pretended not to notice. Instead, she pulled out the textbook and flipped to the next section. They worked through the problems together, Lila explaining step by step, breaking it down in ways that made Emily stop and say, Why didn't my teacher just say it like that? It wasn't all numbers, though. In between examples, Emily asked questions. Not the kind that made Lila feel cornered, but the kind that made her feel seen. What books did she like? Did she have a favourite colour? Had she ever been to the beach? Lila answered what she could. Some questions were easier than others. I've never been to the beach, she admitted, but I've read about it. Emily's eyes widened. Never? It's amazing, you have to go, the water looks endless. Lila smiled faintly. Maybe someday. They lost track of time until a shadow crossed the table. Mrs. Hayes, the librarian, stood there with her usual patient smile. Girls, we're closing in 15 minutes. Emily started packing her things. Same time tomorrow? Lila nodded. Yeah. When Emily left, Lila lingered a moment, letting the warmth of the afternoon sun stream through the tall windows. She didn't want to admit it out loud, but she was already looking forward to tomorrow. Back outside, her mum was still under the tree, humming softly and watching a squirrel dart across the grass. Lila sat beside her, holding the granola bar wrapper in her palm like a secret. She didn't say anything, but in her chest, something small and cautious began to grow. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was close. By the end of the week, meeting at the library felt almost normal. Lila would guide her mum to the same shady spot in the park, make sure she had water, and then slip inside before Emily arrived. It was a quiet kind of routine, one that didn't belong to the chaos of her real life, but to this little pocket of time they carved out together. That Friday, Emily came in with her backpack unzipped, a paper bag sticking out from the top. She set it on the table without a word, then slid it across to Lila. "What's this?" Lila asked. "Lunch," Emily said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "My mum packs way too much food. Half of it ends up in the trash if I don't give it away." Inside was a turkey sandwich wrapped in foil, an apple, and a small bag of chips. Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to say she couldn't take it, that she didn't want to feel like charity. But Emily was already pulling out her math book and flipping to a page marked with a neon pink sticky note. "Okay," Emily said, tapping the problem set. "Explain this one again, the thing about making the bottom numbers match." So Lila unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite between explanations, the salt from the chips mixing with the sound of pencils scratching across paper. It was strange, this feeling of eating while talking about math, like she was in a real class. When they finished, Emily leaned back in her chair, twisting her braid between her fingers. "You know, you're actually a really good teacher." Lila laughed softly. "Teachers go to college for that, I'm just figuring it out as I go." "Still," Emily said, "you make it make sense. I wish you were in my class." Lila's smile faded a little. "That's not going to happen." Emily hesitated. "What if you could? What if you came to my school? My dad—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. "What about your dad?" Lila asked. "Nothing," Emily said quickly. He's very particular about who I spend time with." Lila understood without needing more words. She'd seen enough from the outside to know how people like Emily's father viewed girls like her. No steady home, no polished clothes, no future worth investing in. They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them heavier than before. Then Emily reached across the table and nudged Lila's hand. "Well, he doesn't have to know, we'll just keep meeting here." Lila nodded slowly, though part of her new secrets never stayed hidden forever. When she stepped back outside, the late afternoon light spilled over the park, painting the grass gold. Her mum was still there, humming softly, her eyes tracking the movement of the clouds. Lila sat beside her, the paper bag tucked into her jacket pocket. She didn't tell her mum about Emily or the food or the math lessons. It felt too fragile, too new. Some things you had to hold close until you were sure they wouldn't disappear. And yet, as she walked her mum back toward the shelter that evening, she caught herself imagining what it would be like if this fragile thing somehow lasted. The following Tuesday, the library was closed for staff training. Lila had been dreading telling Emily. She figured their routine would just skip a day. But when Emily found her sitting on the bench outside, she didn't look disappointed at all. "We could go somewhere else," Emily said, her voice carrying that spark of an idea she'd already decided was good. "Like where?" Lila asked. "There's a little park a few blocks over. It's quieter, and they've got picnic tables. We could still do math, and maybe just talk." Lila hesitated. She was used to keeping her world small, predictable. Straying too far from the library meant she'd have to leave her mum in a new spot, and that made her nervous. "I'll walk with you," Emily offered quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "We can make sure your mum's settled first." So they walked together, Emily keeping pace with Lila's shorter steps. When they reached the tree where her mum sat, Lila knelt down and spoke softly. "I'm going to be just over there, Mum. You'll be able to see me." Her mum nodded vaguely, eyes still following something invisible in the sky. The park was almost empty. A few toddlers toddled toward the playground, their parents close behind. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and grilled onions drifting from a nearby food cart. Emily picked a table under a maple tree, its broad leaves casting dappled shade. They spread out Emily's books, but it didn't take long before the conversation drifted away from fractions. Emily told Lila about her school, the cafeteria noise, the way certain teachers had good days and bad days, the pressure to always look like she had it together. "It's weird," Emily said, tracing circles on the tabletop with her pencil. "People think being me means you have everything, but sometimes I feel like I'm invisible. Like no one's really paying attention unless I mess up." Lila tilted her head. "How can you feel invisible? You have friends, a house, a family." Emily shrugged. "A family that's busy, friends who like the idea of me more than the real me." She paused. "You actually listen." Lila didn't know what to say to that. She'd never thought of herself as someone people sought out for comfort. But maybe that's what made this friendship feel so different. It wasn't about what they had or didn't have, it was about the space they gave each other to just be. When they packed up, Emily pulled something from her backpack. A small spiral notebook with a blue cover. "For you," she said, sliding it across the table. "So you can write stuff down without using scraps." Lila ran her fingers over the smooth cover. It was brand new, not a single bent page. "Why are you giving me this?" Emily shrugged, a shy smile on her lips. "Because you deserve to have something that's yours." For a moment, Lila couldn't speak. She just nodded, tucking the notebook under her arm like it was something precious. As they walked back toward her mum, Lila glanced at Emily and thought about how rare it was for two worlds like theirs to meet, rarer still for them to actually stay. She didn't know it yet, but this small step outside the library was going to change everything. It was a warm Friday afternoon when it finally happened. Lila and Emily were at their usual table in the little park, the blue notebook open between them, pages now filled with neat numbers and messy doodles. They were laughing about something small, a math problem that accidentally looked like a smiley face, when a shadow fell across the table. Emily's smile faded first. Lila looked up and saw a boy, maybe 15, standing there with a basketball tucked under his arm. His hair was damp with sweat, his sneakers muddy from the court. "Emily," he said, eyebrows raised, "what are you doing here?" Emily straightened in her seat. "Just hanging out." The boy's eyes flicked to Lila, scanning her faded hoodie, her scuffed shoes, the way she kept her hands folded in her lap. "With her?" He didn't bother hiding the edge in his voice. Lila felt the familiar heat in her cheeks, the one that came when people decided who she was before she said a word. She dropped her gaze to the table, tracing the grain in the wood. "She's my friend, Tyler," Emily said firmly. Tyler let out a short laugh. "Your friend? Do your parents know you're hanging out with—" He trailed off, but the meaning sat heavy in the air. Emily's jaw tightened. "She's helping me with schoolwork." Tyler smirked. "Right, looks like she needs the help more than you." That was enough for Lila. She closed the notebook gently, sliding it toward Emily. "I should go." Her voice was steady, but her stomach felt like it was caving in. Emily reached for her arm. "You don't have to—" "It's fine," Lila said, standing up. She knew it wasn't fine, but the last thing she wanted was for Emily to fight with someone from her world because of her. She walked quickly across the grass toward the bench where her mum was sitting. Her mother was humming to herself, oblivious to the knot forming in Lila's chest. She didn't look back, but she could hear Emily calling her name softly, not wanting to make a scene. By the time they reached the shelter that evening, the blue notebook was still in Lila's hand, but she hadn't opened it since. She sat on the thin mattress, staring at the cover, wondering how long it would be before someone, a parent, a teacher, maybe even Emily herself, decided this friendship wasn't worth the trouble. And for the first time since they'd met, Lila wasn't sure if tomorrow would still belong to them. The next morning, Lila didn't go to the park. She told herself it was because she needed to help her mum get a spot at the church breakfast line, but deep down she knew the truth. She didn't want to risk seeing Emily and feeling that same burn in her chest. They spent most of the day drifting between familiar places, her mum mumbling under her breath as they walked. By late afternoon they ended up back at the shelter, where the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and instant coffee. Lila sat on the edge of her cot, the blue notebook tucked under her pillow like a secret she wasn't sure she should keep anymore. It was almost sunset when she heard her name. "Lila!" She looked up, startled, and there was Emily, standing in the doorway of the shelter like she didn't care who saw her. Her hair was a little messy from running, and she was holding a paper bag in one hand, the strap of her backpack slipping off her shoulder. "What are you doing here?" Lila asked, glancing toward the shelter staff. A few of them were already watching, curious. "I came to find you," Emily said, walking straight over. "You didn't show up today. I thought maybe—" She stopped, catching her breath. "I thought maybe you weren't coming back." Lila shrugged, looking down. "Maybe it's better that way. People don't understand—" "I don't care what people understand," Emily cut in, her voice firmer than Lila had ever heard it. "Tyler was being a jerk. He doesn't get to decide who my friends are." Lila tried to smile, but it didn't stick. "Your dad might feel different." Emily set the paper bag on Lila's cot. "Then I guess my dad's going to have to get used to it." Inside the bag was a sandwich, 2 apples, and a pack of mechanical pencils. Lila stared at it, her throat tightening. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," Emily said simply. "And tomorrow we meet at the park. Same time. No disappearing on me." Lila held her gaze, searching for any sign that this was pity or charity, but all she saw was stubbornness. The kind of stubbornness that didn't scare easily. Slowly she nodded. Emily smiled then, like the sun breaking through cloud cover. "Good, because you still owe me a lesson on decimals." That night, long after Emily had left, Lila lay awake on her cot, the blue notebook back in her hands. For the first time in days, she opened it and began to write. Not math problems this time, but words, just a few. Maybe this is real. It was a Saturday when the first crack in their secret began to show. Emily had asked Lila to meet her not at the park, but outside the small coffee shop across from the library. "It's quieter there," she'd said. "We can sit at the tables out front and no one will bother us." When Lila arrived, she spotted Emily instantly. Her plaid skirt replaced by jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked normal, in a way that made her blend in with everyone else on the sidewalk. Emily waved, grinning, and Lila felt the tight knot in her stomach loosen. They spent the first hour working through word problems and sharing a blueberry muffin Emily had insisted they split. People passed by, some glancing at them, but no one seemed to care. That was until a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The passenger side window rolled down and a man's voice called, "Emily!" Emily froze for a half second before looking over. "Dad?" The man stepped out, tall and sharply dressed even on a Saturday. His shoes shined in the afternoon light, and his presence seemed to make the air feel heavier. Lila didn't need an introduction to know who he was. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone more curious than angry. But it was the kind of curiosity that made Lila's pulse quicken. "Just studying," Emily said, trying to keep her voice even. Her father's eyes shifted to Lila. He took in the worn hoodie, the scuffed sneakers, the way she sat a little straighter now. "And this is my friend," Emily said quickly. "Lila." Lila gave a small nod, her voice caught somewhere between wanting to speak and wanting to disappear. Her father looked between them for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "I didn't know you had a study partner outside school," he said finally. Emily shrugged. "We just started meeting. She's been helping me with math." There was another pause, and then he glanced at his watch. "I'll be in the car," he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. "Don't be long." Emily waited until he was back inside the sedan before leaning across the table. "He's probably wondering a million things right now," she whispered. Lila's chest tightened. "Do you think he's mad?" "I think..." Emily hesitated. "I think he's curious, which means we need to be careful." They finished the session quickly, their usual easy conversation replaced by an unspoken tension. When Emily left, sliding into the back seat of the car, her father glanced once more at Lila through the window before they drove away. It wasn't anger she'd seen in his eyes, not yet, but it was something, and Lila knew that whatever it was, it would follow them into tomorrow. Monday afternoon, the park felt different. The air was still warm, the trees still swayed gently in the breeze, but Lila couldn't shake the image of Emily's father watching her from behind that car window. She kept glancing toward the street, half expecting that black sedan to reappear. Emily arrived a little late, jogging across the grass with her backpack bouncing against her side. "Sorry," she said, dropping onto the bench beside Lila. "My dad asked a lot of questions this morning." Lila's stomach sank. "About me?" Emily nodded. "Like, who you are, where you go to school. I didn't tell him much, just that you're my friend and you're helping me with math." "And what did he say?" Emily hesitated. "He said he wants to meet you properly, tomorrow." Lila's fingers tightened around the edge of the blue notebook in her lap. "Meet me? Why?" Emily leaned forward. "Because he's curious. And honestly, I think he wants to make sure I'm safe. But I told him you're not..." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I told him you're the reason I've been doing better in class." Lila's chest tightened. She'd met plenty of adults who judged her without a word. She could already imagine the way his eyes would travel from her clothes to her shoes to the empty space where a parent should be standing beside her. The next day came too fast. Lila arrived early, guiding her mum to a shady spot under the old maple tree. Her mother was in one of her quieter moods, humming softly and stroking the hem of her jacket. Lila smoothed her hair, wiped her hands on her jeans and sat on the bench to wait. When the sedan pulled up, she felt her pulse in her ears. Emily hopped out first, smiling in a way that was meant to be reassuring. Her father stepped out behind her, the sunlight catching on his watch, his shadow stretching across the grass. "Lila," he said, his voice even. "It's good to meet you." She stood, clutching the notebook to her chest. "Hello, sir." For a moment, he just looked at her. Not unkindly, but with a weight in his gaze that made her feel both seen and measured. "Emily tells me you've been helping her, that true?" "Yes," Lila said, her voice small but steady. "She's smart. She just needed someone to explain things a little differently." Something flickered across his face, though she couldn't read it. He glanced toward the tree where her mother sat, then back at Lila. "Is that your mum?" Lila swallowed. "Yes, she's not well." He nodded once, slowly, as if filing the information away. "All right," he said, his tone softer now. "How about you and I talk for a few minutes?" Emily stepped closer to Lila, her hand brushing hers in quiet reassurance. "It's okay," she whispered, "just be yourself." Lila wasn't sure what herself even looked like to a man like this. But as she followed him toward the shade of the maple tree, she knew one thing. Whatever happened next could change everything. They sat at a picnic table under the maple tree, the sound of traffic from the nearby street fading into the background. Emily lingered a few steps away, watching, but her father's attention was fully on Lila. "Tell me about yourself," he said. Not like an order, but like someone trying to fill in missing pages. Lila hesitated. She'd learned a long time ago that too much honesty could scare people off. But there was something in his tone, steady, patient, that made her want to answer. "I'm 12. I used to go to school, but when the lady who paid my fees moved away, I had to stop. My mum, she can't work. We stay wherever we can, shelters, sometimes the park. I try to keep her safe." He listened without interrupting, his hands folded loosely on the table. "And the studying with Emily?" A small smile tugged at Lila's lips. "She's smart. She just needed someone to break things down. I've been teaching myself for years. Books from the library, old worksheets I find. I guess I just like figuring things out." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he glanced toward where her mother sat, head bowed, humming to herself. "Does your mum get any treatment?" Lila shook her head. "We've tried clinics, but they're full, or we can't get there, and she doesn't trust strangers." Her voice caught on that last part. He looked back at her, and there was something different in his eyes now. Not pity, but recognition. Like he was remembering a version of himself no one else knew. "You've been carrying a lot for someone your age." Lila shrugged. "It's just life." He leaned forward slightly. "What if I could help? Get your mum into a good program and get you back in school?" Her eyes widened, unsure if she'd heard him right. "Why?" "Because my daughter is better off for knowing you," he said simply. "And because sometimes the right thing to do is the obvious one." Lila felt her throat tighten. She glanced over at Emily, who was watching with hopeful eyes. Would I still see her?" He almost smiled. "That's the point. The rest happened in a blur." He spoke with the shelter director, made a few phone calls, and by that evening, a van from a local care facility had come for her mother, not to take her away forever, but to give her a safe place, warm meals, and real medical help. Lila stood by the curb, clutching Emily's hand as she watched her mum step inside, the driver speaking gently to her. When the van pulled away, Lila felt hollow and full all at once. She didn't know if her mum would get better, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was facing it alone. Her father, Emily's father, turned to her then. "You'll stay with us for now. We'll figure the rest out together." That night, Lila slept in a real bed for the first time in years. Clean sheets, a soft pillow, and the faint sound of Emily breathing in the bed across the room. She lay there staring at the ceiling, the blue notebook on the nightstand beside her. Before she closed her eyes, she reached for it, flipped to the first blank page and wrote in careful letters, "I have a chance now." And for the first time she could remember, she believed it. Kindness can open doors that seemed locked forever. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see you for who you are, not where you come from, to change everything. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment of this story. I'm truly grateful for that. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again soon here on Rain Inside.